Before we begin today's video, I have an important request. This channel is still new, and we need your support to grow. If you enjoy powerful stories from history like this one, please consider subscribing. Your subscription helps us continue bringing more content like this to the channel. Now, let's dive into the incredible mission of James Howard, the lone pilot who faced 30 enemy fighters, and didn't back down. The sky over Germany on January 11, 1944, was a tapestry of steel-gray clouds and distant echoes of engine rumble. American B-17 bombers from the 8th Air Force were pressing deep into German territory, targeting key aircraft production facilities in Oschersleben, a vital center for the Luftwaffe's war machine. This was no ordinary raid. The Germans knew the significance of this strike and had scrambled a massive defensive force. Dozens of Focke-Wulf FW-190s and Messerschmitt Bf-109s took to the air, waiting for their moment to strike at the vulnerable bombers. But what they didn't expect was a single American pilot who would defy all odds. Major James H. Howard was a squadron leader in the 354th Fighter Group, flying a sleek and powerful P-51 Mustang. Originally a member of the famed Flying Tigers in China, Howard was no stranger to facing overwhelming odds. But even he could not have foreseen what awaited him on that cold January day. As the Mustang squadrons escorted the bombers toward their target, thick clouds, navigation errors, and poor coordination broke up the formations. Many fighter escorts became separated from the bomber stream. In the chaos, James Howard found himself alone. When the Luftwaffe launched a ferocious counterattack, it was a scene of chaos and desperation. Waves of German fighters emerged from the clouds and the horizon, zeroing in on the unescorted bombers. B-17 gunners fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. And into this inferno dove Howard. He spotted the first group of FW-190s diving onto the bombers and didn't hesitate. With full throttle, Howard climbed to intercept. He burst through the enemy formation like a ghost with guns, his 6.50 caliber machine guns blazing. One of the FW-190s burst into flames and spiraled out of the sky. The others scattered, startled by the sudden presence of an American fighter. But Howard wasn't done. He looped around and re-engaged, diving again into the fray. For more than half an hour, he wove through the sky, drawing German fighters away from the bombers. Time and again, he broke up coordinated attacks, forcing German pilots to break formation and deal with this solitary American threat. Every time the bombers were in danger, Howard was there, firing, chasing, maneuvering. What made his actions even more extraordinary was that he was completely alone. Other P-51 pilots had become separated or forced to disengage due to fuel constraints, damage, or confusion. Howard had no wingman. No backup. Just a single P-51 Mustang against what would eventually be estimated as more than 30 enemy fighters. And yet, he stayed. At one point, Howard's guns jammed, forcing him to disengage temporarily. But instead of fleeing, he circled at a distance, working to clear the jam, then returned to the fight. He didn't just stay in the air, he kept attacking. His persistence disrupted the Luftwaffe's rhythm. Every time a German fighter tried to line up a B-17, Howard was there. His aircraft was hit, damaged by cannon and machine gun fire, but he kept flying, refusing to break off the engagement. The bomber crews could hardly believe what they were seeing. Pilots and gunners watched as this lone fighter danced among the enemy, acting as both sword and shield. After the mission, B-17 crews described the event in awe. "There's a crazy Mustang up there flying circles around the Jerry's," one gunner reportedly said. Another crewman remarked, "He must have been hit a dozen times, but he kept coming back." Eventually, the German fighters began to withdraw. Their initial confidence broken by the relentless attacks of the lone Mustang, many chose to disengage or lost their momentum entirely. The bombers had suffered losses, but the outcome could have been far worse. And a large part of that was due to one man. When Howard finally returned to base, his aircraft was riddled with holes, his ammunition nearly exhausted. Ground crews swarmed the Mustang, amazed it was still airworthy. Howard, calm and quiet as ever, said little. He wasn't one to boast or exaggerate. But news of his daring action spread quickly. The bomber crews had told the tale. And soon, the press picked it up. The headlines called him One-Man Air Force. For his actions, Howard was awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming the only fighter pilot in the European theater of operations to receive the nation's highest military decoration. His citation praised his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, and for good reason. What he had done was not only tactically impressive, it was heroic in the purest sense of the word. Howard later recalled that he didn't think about being outnumbered. He had a job to do. The bombers were vulnerable, and if he didn't act, they would be slaughtered. That clarity of purpose, that dedication to mission over self-preservation, defined not just that day but his entire career. From China to Europe, Howard was a warrior in the skies. But beyond the Medal of Honor, beyond the stories and accolades, there was something else that endured: respect. Among bomber crews, Howard's name became legend. Pilots who flew with him later would say that if James Howard was in the sky, you felt safer. And even among enemy pilots, there was a grudging recognition of what he had done. One man, one aircraft, had challenged a swarm, and held his ground. Howard's mission over Oschersleben became a symbol of what a single individual, driven by courage and conviction, could achieve even in the face of impossible odds. It was a day when heroism wasn't a matter of planning, but of instinct and sacrifice. A moment where the thin line between survival and disaster rested on the shoulders of a solitary pilot. In the days that followed the mission over Oschersleben, the story of Major James Howard's actions spread through every corner of the 8th Air Force. From flight lines to officers' mess halls, bomber crews shared first-hand accounts of the Mustang that had saved them. Pilots and gunners spoke with equal parts disbelief and admiration. Some thought it was a fluke, a mistake, a story exaggerated by the fog of war, but then came the reports. Dozens of witnesses. Confirmed kills. Gun camera footage. The truth was clear: Howard had gone up alone and held off more than 30 enemy fighters. What made Howard's feat so rare was not just his bravery, it was his tactical brilliance. He didn't charge blindly into the fray. Instead, he used the Mustang's superior range and maneuverability to disrupt the German attack patterns. He never stayed in one place long enough to become a stationary target. Instead, he darted in, delivered bursts of fire, and peeled off to strike again from a different angle. His movements created chaos in the Luftwaffe formations. German pilots, expecting to shred helpless bombers, suddenly found themselves targeted. Their confidence eroded, they struggled to coordinate. Some pulled away. Others were shot down. Howard had forced the Luftwaffe to react to him, stealing their initiative, and in aerial combat, that can mean the difference between victory and annihilation. When the reports reached General Jimmy Doolittle and other high-ranking officers, Howard's actions were quickly recognized as beyond anything that could be expected of a single fighter pilot. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor moved swiftly through command. Howard, a modest man, never lobbied for recognition. In fact, he downplayed his role, insisting he only did what was needed at the time. But those around him knew better. They had seen what he'd done. He had, by sheer will and skill, turned the tide of a desperate moment. On June 5, 1944, James Howard stood in the spotlight at a ceremony in London. With generals, pilots, and journalists present, he was awarded the Medal of Honor by General Karl Spaatz. In his speech, Spaatz called Howard's actions a shining example of courage, leadership, and self-sacrifice. The medal gleamed under the lights, but Howard's expression remained humble. He simply nodded, shook hands, and quietly returned to his duties. What many don't know is that James Howard had already lived 2 lifetimes before that fateful mission. Born in China to American missionary parents, he was fluent in Chinese and had once planned to become a medical doctor. But the sky called to him. He joined the Navy in 1937 and flew from carriers before resigning to join the American volunteer group, the Flying Tigers, fighting Japanese forces in the skies over Burma and China. There, he had already made a name for himself, shooting down multiple enemy aircraft and surviving extreme combat. His transition from the Pacific to Europe was seamless. The skills he developed against fast and aggressive Japanese pilots served him well over Germany. But it was over Oschersleben that his entire journey, naval aviator, Flying Tiger, Mustang leader, culminated in one extraordinary hour of flight. After the war, Howard remained in the Air Force for a time but eventually returned to civilian life. He wrote a memoir, Roar of the Tiger, reflecting on his service and his time in China. He spoke occasionally at events, offering insights into leadership and courage, but he never sought celebrity. He settled into a quiet life, working in public service and living with the dignity of a man who had stared into the jaws of death and come out stronger. Yet for all his post-war accomplishments, he was always remembered first for that mission. For the day he chose not to retreat. For the moment he said, in action if not words, not on my watch. The mission over Oschersleben is still taught in military academies as an example of initiative, bravery, and the impact one individual can make. Howard's flight wasn't just a footnote in World War II history, it became a legend. Perhaps the most striking part of Howard's story is how human it is. He was not a superhero. He had fears, doubts, and fatigue like any other man. But in that crucial hour, he rose above those things. He placed the safety of others, men he didn't know personally, above his own survival. He ignored the odds. He didn't wait for orders. He acted. The B-17 crews who survived that day never forgot the sight of his Mustang slicing through the sky, engines screaming, guns roaring. They owed him their lives. To them, he wasn't just a pilot, he was their guardian. Their lone savior. Years later, when asked about that mission, Howard gave a typically understated response: "I saw the bombers were in trouble, and I was in a position to help. So I did." Therein lies the essence of James Howard. Not a man driven by medals or glory, but by duty. A pilot who understood that sometimes, one person standing firm can make all the difference in the world. His story is not just one of military triumph, but of personal resolve, of a man who met chaos with courage, and who flew into history one Mustang sortie at a time. And so, the name James Howard remains etched into the legacy of the greatest generation, not just as a Medal of Honor recipient, but as a symbol of fearless resolve when all others might have turned back.